Okay, so welcome to IMD also. I'm really happy that we can sort of have this discussion together. And indeed, all right, here we are, right, the buyer's guide. So clearly, I mean, I've been at IMD since 2008, and my job as an innovation professor has changed quite a bit. I mean, we used to do design thinking journeys in a very traditional way. These days, we're using Gen AI, we're using all kinds of tools because it has really impacted the way we work. But of course, there's a lot of, when I hear Microsoft telling me about the synthetic users, I see the opportunity, but I also think about the risk, right? I mean, I'm working with Nestle, I'm working with L'Oreal, with the Olympic Committee, and I start to see in those presentations, right, interviews, right, quotes, and you're not quite sure sometimes whether they're coming from the real world or whether they are coming from those synthetic personas. So I think the opportunity is immense, but we have to be a little bit careful as well. And today, when I look at of course, the topic I was asked to discuss, we know that Gen AI is here to stay. Doesn't matter which study you look at, right? Companies are embracing those tools to a large extent. In fact, last week, McKinsey sort of published this study. Every year they do the state of AI, they're sort of following the adoption. And apparently last year, right, since last year, there's been a spike in the adoption of those tools. And this is certainly something that I can feel as well at IMD. And why is that? Well, clearly the way we've presented AI is that it's a set of tools that help people concentrate on what really matters, right? The thinking, the creativity aspect of things, right? And there's a lot of tasks that are very tedious that maybe we shouldn't be doing by hand, where computers and machine learning can actually help. So this is a study actually that was just released earlier this month, where in fact, now those large language models are more effective than financial analysts to predict future earnings. So why do we even need those financial analysts anymore? Or what is it that financial analysts should spend their time on if those tools can do the analysis better? Now, one of my famous studies that I love the most, right, is that how do you deal with gender bias in all kinds of fields, including Hollywood movies. And AI, has helped researchers to actually go through, millions of movies and really quantify the bias that might exist in terms of gender parity in those fields. We couldn't do this by hand. But what is actually very interesting these days is that if you look at AI, it's excelling not just at doing the tedious work, but actually doing tasks that typically we thought were the privilege of humans, right? Like empathy, judgment. And so this is a great study actually from Google, where they had a bunch of actors simulating the role of patients interacting with doctors or AI, and indeed then they analyzed all of those conversations. A jury that didn't know if the conversations were essentially coming from AI or coming from real doctors, were rating the quality of the answers on a number of criteria. But it's interesting to see that on empathy and proximity and so on with the patient, then AI actually beat the primary care doctors. Right? So even a task like this, right, AI is starting to play a role. If you don't trust because it's Google, then there's a very scientific study that found exactly the same findings, right? Where both on the quality of the diagnostic, but then the empathy. How well is the doctor attuned to my needs and able to get close to my world? Then AI is actually rated as more empathetic. Right? So really, when you look at this, there's great opportunity to help us do our work better, but there's also fears, right? So we know that it could displace all kinds of workers. Different studies that show different numbers, but for sure some jobs are going to be created thanks to AIs, others are going to be lost. We know that, right? Elon Musk says that in fact maybe one day we'll just work because it's fun to do so, right? It'll be a leisure kind of type of activity because AI could be replacing all of us in any sort of job. But I guess we have later studies like New York Times. You could even do the job of the CEO. So no. And of course, we know that we've been there before, we've heard that before, and technology is always improving tremendously, but in the end, humans are always needed. So that's the perspective, of course, that we have at IMD. We work with AI, but it's never going to replace humans. It might replace humans, though, who don't work with AI, and that's where it becomes really interesting. So I'm an optimist, I'm a professor of innovation, I really believe in the power of those tools, that it can help us, right, do things that we couldn't do on our own. It can put us in touch with very distant fields of knowledge that possibly even very smart and very curious people could not get access to, and it's helping to make those connections between pieces of knowledge, right, that are very dispersed, right, and getting access to ingredients, to come back to the chef metaphor, that are not in our fridge. So I really believe that the potential is there, and in particular in terms of invention. So just to tell you a little bit about the research, because there's been a lot of research on AI and how can it help invention, how can it help the best innovators to come up with ideas they couldn't come up with on their own. Here is a study that is looking at, this is a typical test, you basically ask people, how many different users of basketball can you think of? And of course, humans can play that game, AI can play that game, and again, AI is beating 99% of humans in those kind of like little simple creativity tests, right? Now what is interesting is that in the world of invention, right? I mean, you could also think about AI to generate ideas for potential startups that could be created. And then again, recent study showed that AI is also outperforming business school students in the idea of new businesses, and you can see the graphs here. And this is where it's interesting, is that it cannot fully replace human expertise. To this date, right, when you actually look at the quality of the ideas that are being presented, and in fact not just the quantity of ideas, right? The earlier test is about how many more users can you think of a basketball? Is that really interesting, right? Or are we actually rating, quality of ideas being generated? And this is when some studies been published on this actually show that the best ideas, right, are still human. And this is an interesting study that I think shows us what is happening here. Consultants from BCG, 758 of them, so that's 7% of the workforce for BCG, actually entered this sort of experiment with a number of professors from Harvard, from Wharton, and so on. And then they had to sort of work on issues, right, that could also be tackled by AI. 2 different types of tasks, right? Little C creativity, day-to-day creativity, simple task, 18 of them around those different dimensions, creativity, analytical thinking, and so on. But then a more complex task, typical of a mission that would be undertaken by a consulting team at BCG that would maybe mobilize them for a couple of months. Also, right, ask AI to do this. Then let's look at the results, right? Actually, the consultants that use AI outperformed, right, those that did not. And this is very much, again, about augmenting, right, the skills. Is that if you use AI, actually you perform better on all of those tasks, right, that could help you out, right, on the ones that were relevant. But then the more complicated task, and this is where it's interesting, then the humans actually beat AI still to this date, even though AI again is giving you great answers to the case that was offered. The humans actually got the base ratings, and so the question is, why is that? Why is that? Any guess? Why is it that, because you can ask very complex tasks to AI and they will give you very sophisticated answers. And again, this is like very serious stuff, right? A bunch of researchers actually, it's probably the most impressive study that has been done in AI. And a control condition means it's the people who did not have access to the AI, right? And they resolved that case and they did it better. So, and you probably don't know why, but basically when you look at it, is that there is a tendency to delegate, right? So the moment you use AI, right, maybe in fact here it was set up in a way that AI would most likely fail to give you the best possible answers, but the consultants that use AI actually fully trusted the solution that was given to them and failed to exert, their critical judgment. And there was another study still by professors at Harvard Business School that showed that's a big risk with using AI, right, or using a copilot. It should be a copilot. It should not be there to essentially replace you and replace your judgment. So how can I interact with the machine? How can I interact, discuss, iterate, evolve the ideas with the help of AI rather than, oh, great, they can do it better than I would have. Let me trust it falling asleep at the wheel is the big danger. There's a lot of data that suggests that those models, they are also making mistakes. We've talked a lot about hallucinations as one risk, but also there are biases that still exist in the algorithms. I'm sure they will be fixed in time, but the implications can be dramatic. If you think about, we can use AI to screen applicants that apply for a job in much better ways, but are we actually rejecting people, right, that would deserve our attention without even realizing it? So this is why the big message here, sure, let's use AI, but let's not outsource our thinking to the AI. Humans are still very, very important. In fact, probably more important than ever. So we've tried to map, the question is, how do we engage with this emerging landscape? At IMD, we've tried to map the emerging landscape around Gen AI, and of course, Microsoft is one of the key actors. We have a partnership with Microsoft. We use Copilot in many different aspects of our jobs. And of course, all of the big tech players, right, also have a very holistic presence, developing all kinds of applications that can really fundamentally transform our jobs. So how do we do this, right? How do we engage? Given the risks that I've presented, one option, and I have organizations I work with who kind of ban those tools, right? You can't even use them. You can't even use ChatGPT at work. It's amazing. I'm not going to mention some names, but there are big organizations that have taken that road. And of course, it makes me think of, indeed, Sciences Po, and they stopped now. Initially they said, we cannot use ChatGPT. A little bit like when math teachers protested against the use of calculators, right? So but that's kind of one position. The other position is really to engage, right, with those tools and try to co-create with them. This is a position that has been developed by Ethan Mollick, is one of the authors of the study that I mentioned with the BCG consultants. And it's really about co-intelligence. Is how can I use the best of my human abilities and function in a very interesting and symbiotic way with the AI to really augment what I cannot do on my own, but always keep my critical thinking abilities. And so, you can be a centaur, you can be a cyborg. The metaphor is interesting. The centaur, you're kind of riding a very sophisticated horse. The cyborg, you're an hybrid, right, with the machine. And of course, the idea is that you should never be a centaur. You should never delegate fully the work to AI. You should really try to think about, what you want to do and how can AI help you out. And that's a great way of engaging, working in tandem, working as a co-pilot, right, with those things. And this is why I love the IPOVA platform so much. If you look at what it helps us to do, and what it helps innovators to do, is that it's really, the humans are still very much in control of this whole process. It's about, becoming aware of information signals, triggers, that are potentially relevant to my field of study, and then proposing connections. And then the humans have to kind of think about those connections and select, some of those as being potentially relevant, and iterate, right, the concepts that are being formulated together with the machine. That's really the right way to use AI, rather than pressing a button and hoping to get the best answer. So this is my last slide with a few concluding points. When I think about the work I do with organizations at IMD, often they come and they're like, can we please use AI? And I'm like, for what? Right? Or can we, it used to be blockchain, we've got somehow to use blockchain, less so these days. But those tools are just an enabler, right? So it's very important for the leadership team, the whole organization, to understand, again, fundamentally, what are some of the opportunities that we face in our markets, in our industries, how can we add value? How can we bring progress to this world? And then AI and the IPOVA platform becomes an enabler, right? So maybe potentially help us be richer in the way we think about the world. And so there's a great effort of education. Often people are afraid, or they don't really know what is possible to achieve and what is not possible to achieve, what are some of the risks as well of AI. So there's a lot of effort to educate, and the best education is by letting people play with it, experimenting with it, seeing how AI can support their job rather than replace them. But really, for me, it's about starting to work with executives here at IMD on some well-identified issues. There are problems that exist that are important. We can try to resolve them the way we've always tried to tackle those problems, or we can also try to play with those tools and see how we can do things a little bit differently. and that requires great partners, right, along the way. It's very difficult for organizations these days to develop those tools internally or to make use of the tools that exist without really nurturing relationships with important actors in this space. But I think it's very important, last point, right, for organizations to be very clear, to have very clear frameworks. So for me, the organizations I work with, when they report the work that they've done, it has to be absolutely crystal clear what is coming from synthetic data, what is coming from the real world. I don't want to be seeing quotes, mixed up in the thing, like, we kind of conveniently forget to mention that it's a synthetic user. I think organizations have to be very, very clear, right, around, the vision, but also put in place some principles to make sure that there's no negative spillovers that could emerge that are sort of unanticipated. So thank you very much, and I wish you a great continuation for the rest of the day with the following speakers.
Yeah, it's such a pleasure to be here. I would also like to talk just a few minutes on innovation for AI and AI for innovation. It's such an exciting feedback loop. So I'm Martin, I'm working at EPFL in research, and I would just like to talk about a few things on the LLM as a key technology these days to try to understand a bit how it works, and also then a concrete use case where we worked on a medical LLM, and then a recent research initiative which we're starting. So LLMs, these large language models, they work in a very simple way, so that they're learning from text that's already there. So they're learning from all the text on the internet, reading it, and then predicting the next word, right? And how is this done? So it's a very classic prediction model. It's like a classifier of which word is the next word. And that's all to it, right? Now the beautiful thing is you can just let it read all the text in the world and train this little black box to do the job to be correct. What is the next word? Okay, what's in the black box? I can be a little bit more precise, and I hope this is not too technical, but this is how the box looks like. So we have the input text on the bottom, so that would be the words that are already written. You just put a 1 if your word is there, and you have a certain vocabulary size, all the possible words, right? And then on top you have the output, and that's where you want to have the highest value you want to have where the true next word is there. And then you just adjust all these little connections, the gray lines, you adjust them to be good at this, right? To make sure that the green word gets the highest number. And that's it, that's all. That's training of deep learning networks. And so, okay, this has been around a long time, and yeah, deep learning is not new. So what happened? We had some improvements in these capabilities before, so what's different this time? So already more than 10 years ago, we saw there was an increase in the accuracy of deep learning in the traditional task of, let's say, we classify images. Is this an image of a chicken or of a duck? And there was the accuracy improved that year because people switched from traditional methods to deep learning. And now, just last year, again, there was a jump in accuracy. And was a similar thing that now the task I just showed you, the next word prediction, that we got more accurate from 70 to 80% or something like this. So what is the big deal? Then it's just what I find extremely fascinating is like the breadth of the tools that we have with ChatGPT now. Because in the previous year, a decade ago, the task was extremely narrow, right? It was very, very specific on a very specific data set, which cost a lot of work. You had to collect this data to do one very narrow task. And today, with this technology of the next word, right? Suddenly, almost every task works. You don't even need to collect any data. It just works out of the box. This is what we call like zero-shot learning. It can do anything because everything you want to do, it can be formulated in language. You can say, okay, I want to do this, help me doing this. So that's why I think this is really just so different. I've been in research in this technology for 18 years now, and it feels like kind of nothing happened in the 20 years until now, but then everything kind of happened just 1 year ago with ChatGPT, and it's fascinating, right? That it turned out it was not such a question of what is really this neural network architecture or so. It was a question on what to train on, right? What can we learn from? And we have to give a bit of credit to OpenAI, right? That they really, 2 or 3 years ago, they were the only ones who believed that this basic technology, which was already there, it would work if you scale it to the whole data of the internet, right? I think Google and so on, they did not believe this would work, right? So this next word prediction thing, they did not invest much, but OpenAI was saying, yes, we want to scale this, and we want to learn from the public knowledge that's already there, the whole internet. And that turned out to be the right thing. It works, and it works just amazingly, right? So that I wouldn't have guessed that it really can do so many things. I'm not saying it's perfect, right? But I'm saying that almost everything it can do to an accuracy that's above a reasonable human accuracy, right? Sometimes even across, getting close to specialist capability. And by the way, this is also what iProa was believing from the beginning, the same vision that you can learn from the public knowledge on the web, and you can analyze it. And I think that's the right vision. And okay, so to be more concrete, we also work on LLMs, and we try to do things in the public space. We don't have as much resource as OpenAI, of course. So we try to work with some specific models for specific tasks, which is also mentioned before. Here was medical. Let's try to teach medical skills to a language model. We worked with students at EPFL. We took, again, the public available data of medical papers. You can download it from the internet. And then train your language model to be good on that, the medical papers and medical guidelines and so on. And this worked very nicely. It turned out to be the best available model which was openly available. So the best open source in this for the medical domain. And we don't have as many GPUs, so we use a smaller cluster, which is available at university, and we trained for 2 weeks on these GPUs, and it worked very well, I would say. So you look at the results that even for this kind of smaller scale training, even with that, you could get as accurate as a medical doctor. Like we also did an evaluation where real medical doctors look at all the results from the language models and from real doctors and compare the two. And they were agreeing that it's equal or better than a medical resident in that sense. But of course, you have to be extremely careful, right? This is a very sensitive use case, and that was also kind of the point, right? So even if it is like a doctor, the problem is we can still not trust it because it doesn't take the responsibility when it's wrong, even if it's wrong in a similar amount of times, right? So but this is just really interesting, and we were also very motivated by this because we think because it's so sensitive, it's also very important that it's done in the open, right? That we can that we have transparency on what it was trained on, right? I showed you the data it was trained on, to be sure to also evaluate it very carefully, to have everything in the open, so that then people can evaluate it, to maybe certify it eventually. I mean, we are not there yet, right? But in the future, to have maybe a regulatory body which would look at the evolution of all these language models, try to certify, find weaknesses, try to break them, see what are the pros and cons, to make sure they're safe, right? So that's the longer term goal. So, and yeah, so what's the big picture is, I think it's all about the data, right? It's really about what data did you use in the pre-training, right? Here is really the big effort. It's needed. 99% of the work is here, where all the resources spent, the whole internet, right? Everything available in the public. Then this in the middle is the alignment, kind of fine-tuning, which is a much shorter time period, smaller data sets, and then finally to use your model and to make sure you can evaluate it, right? That's where you evaluate if it's safe or not. And that's also very crucial to make sure, I mean, for your business case to collect the right evaluation data, to be sure you have covered all the possible failure modes and so on. And it's very difficult because these tools are so broad, right? They can do everything, but they also can fail at everything potentially. So we have to be very careful how to evaluate it, and there I think is also an important role to play. Yeah, all about the data. And so also there's a lot of models available now. Some of them you can download the model and run on your laptop. I also recommend you to do that. Also, this is a bit about like, okay, buyer's guide, which models should you use? So some of them you really run on your laptop. It's quite fascinating. Even at GPT-4 quality kind of Llama 3, you can run on your laptop. Not train it, but use it, right? So some of them have the data clearly available, and some maybe it's less clear what it was trained on. And yes, sometimes you can also have the models. And we are also trying to make more transparent what went into the training data in terms of the whole web crawl. So we're starting initiatives to annotate, people help us to annotate this and make a multilingual version, because it's really interesting, like if each culture is represented in this training data as well, and you know these models, they perform much more poorly in non-English languages than in English, and that's a concern, right? So we want to understand better what's happening, make sure there's more data from all the languages there, make sure this data is clean and reflects the values of each, of everyone that's kind of using these models, right? Which is not only in the English-speaking world. So that's already starting. Then there's also initiative together with ETH. There's a new cluster that's coming up because it's hard. We cannot easily compete with the kind of investment that Microsoft or the commercial vendors are doing. But that's been a known problem in academia as well, and people are also teaming up because more resources are needed. So this machine is really amazing, and it's this week that it really became available the first time to train. It has 10,000 H100 GPUs, which you can use in Switzerland, and we're trying to group it by some areas to really help build some open models for Swiss languages and European languages, and to be able to scientifically study these models, like why do they work, and how do they work, and what's happening, and what is the multilingual aspect. That's this kind of feedback loop, and I think this is super interesting time because, again, as I was saying in the beginning, it's the first time this year that this technology actually works, or since 1 year, and so it's really exciting to study this and hopefully to produce some interesting results. And yes, so chat with me afterwards if you're interested. I can give you more information, and thank you very much.
If there's question from the audience, but we do have these two professors with us, please, we have 5 minutes and then we can go to the next presentations.
Question? Is this machine the one used by the Swiss data center or not? Because there is a Swiss data center. Are they using this processor to run their models or not?
This is more the supercomputing center in Lugano. Yeah, so this belongs to the ETH domain. They bought this machine 3 years ago, and then they got a really good price. But now it became just available, so we're very lucky to have this machine becoming available now. So. This is a question.
Martin, when are we going to run out of data?
Second, how to get enough data?
When are we going to run out of data?
Oh, we are already running out of data. Like last week, there was a super nice corpus release by Hugging Face, the whole web crawl. And then now it's 15 trillion tokens, 15 trillion words. That's the internet. But now the question is how to get better quality inside that. And that's the hard part. And that's why we're also asking people to help us decide on that. What do we mean by good quality? So that's the game too. Also, I think that's like how Microsoft Phi models are trained to have much more high quality data. So we need to think very hardly what do we mean by high quality. So.
Not 4chan.
Yeah, I hear you.
I was very interested to hear what you had to say about language, the fact that AI out of the English language is sort of comparatively weak. I just wondered if you could talk a little bit more about that and what the implications of that might be further down the line.
Yeah, I find this fascinating. So if you look at the internet, about 50% is English, and the rest is other languages. There's 1,000 languages in the world, right? And then, like, the best open source model now is the Llama 3, and they trained on that, but they throw away the non-English languages, which is a bit unfortunate, except they keep 5%. But even that, they got very good. The model you get is speaking all the languages, like, it even speaks like Swiss German, it's my language, but it's not even written anywhere, but it can do it automatically. So we want to get the best capability in non-English language. But how to get that is not clear. Maybe it's a good idea to first learn English and then learn the other language. So we don't know. We're trying to figure this out, what results in the best. And we cannot change the fact that many languages are just poorly represented on the internet, so you cannot change that. And this leads to a bias, right? What to do about it is an important question.
It just strikes me that if what people are saying about AI is true, is there a danger further down the line that we actually begin to lose languages as a result of the fact that AI is so dominant and AI in the English language is so dominant?
I don't know. I'm optimistic because it also allows us to communicate with everyone in any language. So they can translate, right? But it's just funny that these models, they think actually internally in English. There's a nice paper by EPFL as well, that even if it speaks perfect French to you, but it thinks in English. So, yeah.
What happens if the training data starts to contain increasingly more generated data?
I love that question. Yeah, so they had a study just last week from Hugging Face when they show that is the data in the last 2 years on the web has a lot of the synthetic data now. So it's generating its own training data. So that's a bit scary. And you would think that will make the quality lower. But the strange thing is it actually makes the quality better. So they thought that the more recent 2 years are most valuable for the AI training. I think it's important to investigate this and to also make it transparent. And the way they did it is to look at these special words like delve into. I didn't know the word delve, but it's very much used by ChatGPT. So if you see that word, it's often an indicator. It became twice as frequent last year, the usage of this word. So, yeah. You stop me if you have time.
3 more minutes.
Yeah.
What could be the next source of data? Because scrolling internet will be the low-hanging fruit because it's readily available. But is there any other source of data that is now not used yet, but could be a very good idea to get into, like old libraries that has to be scanned that is not scanned, or maybe something I haven't talked about?
Yeah, it's a great question where to find more data, and I don't know if I think it's maybe it's a lot of company proprietary data that could be used maybe here in the middle. I think this would be very valuable, yeah. But that's for this, it's important to have some open models that then companies can actually see how much the data would add to the mix, right? And I guess that's also what I provide you, for example, to have really the best data for the case of inventions, right? So it's a kind of specific data you want to collect, and maybe a mix of private and proprietary data. Yeah. So.
One more?
Yes.
Not my question. I hear a lot about coding, scraping, whatever data, and as you said, the thing is how to get the data. On the internet doesn't mean that it's for free. It's public, but it's not for free. How do you deal with the copyright things, or you just don't care because as a university it's for non-commercial use, and then you do your stuff and then you see later, or how you do for this question? Because I'm really interested because everyone is going on the internet, including OpenAI and everyone, and but these questions will come at some point one day, right?
Yeah, that's a great question. Like the New York Times is an example, and OpenAI I think may or may not have used YouTube, right? So as a human, you're allowed to watch YouTube, but is the AI also allowed to watch YouTube? That's super valuable, by the way, because it's conversational data, and you want to get conversations. But I think the jury is out. I have no idea. It's quite delicate for us as well to be sure if this is allowed in Switzerland. It's in the EU with the GDPR, it's a bit different. In UK, it's different. In the US, it's different. They have fair use. So it's a bit delicate, and it's also bad for transparency because now people are not sure if they're allowed to say what they trained on, which is bad, right? Because then we don't have the transparency. We don't know when the models fail. We don't know why did they fail because we have no idea what went into training data. It's hallucinating, but how do we even know? We don't know what it's trained on. So we would like to have this legal clarity on what is allowed to train on. Yeah. So if you have any help for this, I'd be glad to.
For universities, it's always you can always hide behind non-commercial use and education and training. So you may have a better position than companies. But I'm just curious then, because many universities have like incubators, startups, spin-offs using the data they already used within the university. So I'm really interested in just trying to know how you deal with the non-commercial use using data in a specific, I would say, scope, and then pushing it to the commercial use. How you handle this?
Yeah, I really don't know. This is a bit of an open problem, and we might need some help there. I mean, on the web it's probably okay, but if you think about books and so on, then it's really not clear, or things like the New York Times and so on, just specific use conditions there.